In this short screencast, I will be introducing you to the urinary system. Specifically, I will be identifying the various structures, regions of the urinary system that you're responsible for identifying on a model or image. For some background reading, you'll find information on the urinary system in Chapter 25 of your textbook and also in Laboratory Exercise 57.
An author of an A&P book, not the one that you're currently using, but another one, makes the statement that one of the functions of the urinary system is to maintain the purity and constancy of our internal fluids. And I think that's a very accurate statement to describe one of the most important functions of the urinary system. The cells of our body are constantly producing waste products, such as nitrogenous wastes, urea, uric acid, ammonia. And if these substances build up to high enough levels, they will actually kill the cells and tissues and organs of the body. Also, as a byproduct of metabolism, our body cells produce different toxins. We also ingest toxins inadvertently that are at very small or trace amounts in our food, but if they are allowed to accumulate in the body, they can potentially cause severe damage and possibly death to our organs and therefore our total person. Also, we consume drugs, legal and illegal, that if they were allowed to build up to high enough levels could also become toxic. But the urinary system does a very good job of eliminating most of these potentially toxic substances from our blood. And because for the most part all of the body fluids, internal body fluids, are derived from blood, by eliminating these waste products from the blood, they also eliminate those waste products from all the other internal fluids. So in that way, the urinary system does maintain the purity and constancy of all of our internal fluids. The urinary system also plays several roles with respect to maintaining homeostasis. The urinary system maintains water balance, making sure that no more or no less water leaves the body than is gained by the body, and this is to maintain the appropriate levels of blood volume. The main determinant of blood pressure is blood volume. So if blood volume gets too high, blood pressure is going to get too high. If blood volume gets too low, blood pressure is going to get too low. So the urinary system regulates blood pressure by maintaining the appropriate water balance. Related to water balance is the level of electrolytes in the blood and other fluids of the body. Water will tend to move by osmosis following charged particles such as electrolytes. Certain electrolytes have to be of an appropriate level in the blood and the interstitial fluids in order to maintain the appropriate gradients between the extracellular fluids and the intracellular fluids so that muscles can contract and neurons can produce action potentials. The urinary system also maintains the appropriate acid-base balance in the blood and other fluids, since most fluids are derived from the blood. If you recall, the kidneys release the hormone erythropoietin, which stimulates the red bone marrow to produce red blood cells. So the urinary system also plays a role in red blood cell formation. And lastly, vitamin D is activated in the kidneys, so the urinary system also plays a vital role in calcium homeostasis. This figure is similar to the one in your book. It basically shows the organs of the urinary system. The kidneys, which are responsible for the production of urine, the ureters, which move that urine from the kidneys down to the urinary bladder. There, the urine is stored until there is an appropriate time to be eliminated from the body, and it is moved from the urinary bladder to the outside world by a short tube called the urethra.
This figure, which is similar to the one in your book, shows the major organs of the urinary system. These bean-shaped structures that you're looking at here are the kidneys. The kidneys are responsible for the production of urine. That urine is then moved into these long, slender tubes which extend from the kidneys down to the pelvis, specifically to the urinary bladder, which is where urine is stored until it's the appropriate time to void, or for that urine to be removed from the body. At that point, the urine passes through this short tube here called urethra, where it then passes out the body to the outside world.
Let's start our discussion on the organs of the urinary system by focusing first on the kidneys. So the kidneys are found against the dorsal body wall. They are not found in the peritoneal cavity. They are behind or posterior to the peritoneum in what's called the retroperitoneum. They are at the level of the 12th thoracic vertebrae to about the 3rd lumbar vertebrae, and the right kidney is lower than the left kidney because of the position of the liver. The kidney is shaped like a kidney bean, and it's a little bigger than your fist. You know from the endocrine chapter that the kidney wears the adrenal gland like a hat, and at a location called the hilus, the ureters, the renal blood vessels, and also nerves that innervate the kidney are attached.
We are now looking at a frontal section of the kidney so we can identify specific structures of the kidney. On the very outer surface of the kidney, we have this fibrous layer, which is called the fibrous capsule. Its function is to protect the deeper portions of the kidney. Just deep to the fibrous capsule, we have the renal cortex. Remember that cortex means bark, like the bark of a tree. So it's always the outer portion of an organ. And since this is the kidney, renal meaning kidney, this outer portion is called the renal cortex. Deep to the renal cortex is a second region called the renal medulla. So this region in here is the renal medulla. Notice that a portion of the renal medulla is shaped like sort of triangular units, and these are called renal pyramids. Notice that the renal pyramids have a wide end which is facing the cortex, and then it narrows as we move more internal to the kidney, and so we have this structure that looks like a triangle somewhat, or like a pyramid, and that's where they get their names. Now, the structures which form urine are found in the cortex and here in the medulla, and so here is where urine is produced, and that urine is collected here in these cup-like structures called calyces. And so imagine urine being formed here and it being drained into these calyces. So all this urine is going to merge, or going to be collected here in this area here called the renal pelvis, and then it's going to move out of the kidney via this tube-like structure here called a ureter.
Ureters are slender muscular tubes which extend from the renal pelvis of the kidney and enter the posterior side of the urinary bladder. the ureters run behind the peritoneum, where they make a connection with the posterior aspect of the bladder. Peristalsis, with the aid of gravity, transports urine down the ureter, where it enters the bladder through ureteral orifices. Urine enters the bladder through the ureteral orifices. The bladder itself is a smooth, collapsible muscular sac. Its function is to store urine until it is appropriate to void or urinate. The bladder expands as it is filled and collapses as it is emptied, with little change in internal pressure.
Let's talk a moment about that urethra. So the urethra is this thin-walled tube that connects the bladder to the outside world. It allows for the passage of urine out of the bladder in a process called voiding, or what you know as urination. There are two round muscles or sphincters that control the movement of urine through the urethra. We have an internal urethral sphincter, which controls the movement of urine from the bladder into the urethra, and this is composed of smooth muscle, so it is not under voluntary control, it's involuntary. And then we have the external urethral sphincter, which is composed of skeletal muscle, and so it is under voluntary control. Now, the significance of this is that the process of urination is therefore has a both involuntary and voluntary component, as I'm sure you have experienced.
There are gender differences with respect to the urethra between males and females. In the male, the urethra is considerably longer. It's 8 inches. It extends through the entire length of the penis, through the prostate, where it makes a connection with the bladder. In males, the urethra is part of both the urinary system and the reproductive system, since it is a common passageway for both urine and sperm. The urethra in females is much shorter than the urethra in males, and it's only a passageway for urine, so it's only a part of the urinary system. Women are much more prone to developing urinary tract infections because the opening of the urethra is surrounded by the vaginal mucosa, which is more hospitable to bacteria than the skin of the penis. Also, the urethra of women, or at least the opening, I should say, is much closer to the anus in women than it is in men. And in particular, poor toiletry habits, that is wiping from back to front, can easily force germs into the urethra, which can cause a urinary tract infection. A urinary tract infection, if not treated, can spread to the bladder and eventually up the ureters to the kidneys.